أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. So we have been stating that the context was important at that point. You have three things coming together: the Prophet, the Quran, and the circumstances around the Prophet. Additionally, we said in the very first beginning talk, it was as if it was all planned meticulously, choreographed. Everything was falling into place bit by bit. When we read the story of the Prophet, we cannot fail to see how everything has been arranged so meticulously. Things are happening in a timely fashion. Everything is meant to happen in the way it is happening at the time in which it is happening. Yet it is a very real human story that is unfolding. But you can see at the same time, things are happening in a very planned, systematic way. When you look at his tremendous success, you cannot attribute it to just coincidences taking place, or just the efforts of the Prophet, or just the revelation in itself, or just the context. Everything has been brought together in a very fine-tuned manner. So today we will look at first the Quran, how it strategizes. We have been talking about it yesterday, how it strategizes the whole missionary process of the Prophet. And then we will look at the circumstances, how everything is coming together. In the midst of all of this, the Blessed Prophet does not know what is going to transpire, and hence it becomes a very real story and so impactful. Had the Prophet known from the outset the caliber of his being, the intensity with which he preached, the realness would not have been there, and that would not have then had the effect that Quran desired to bring in the minds of those that were looking. So the uncertainties of the Prophet, what will happen next, and then the intervention of God. So people took heart that he is being led. We can trust him. His God will not let him down. Pretty much like the story of the Israelites. Moses brings them to the sea. And now what? Ahead of them are the roaring waves. Behind them are the raging chariots. So what will we do now? Now here Moses displays his resolve and shows his real mettle. Kalla, inna ma'iya rabbi sayahdeen. Nay, with me is my Lord, he shall guide me. He has brought us to this point. He will ensure that we are given safe passage. How he will do it, I don't know. But I have that conviction. Now that conviction of Moses does more to the minds of the Israelites than the parting of the sea. Because there they can see that no, he has that conviction and his God is not letting him down. We too need to surrender to that God. And ultimately, what God wants are not bodies or foreheads. He wants living beings to tend to him and to grow truly. So the whole journey of the Prophet is a very, very real journey. It's a huge test for the Prophet, but he is displaying his true mettle. He says, "La adri ma yuf'alu bi wala bikum." I don't know, the Prophet says, what will be done to me or to you. In attabi'u illa ma yuha ilayhi. I simply follow what is being revealed to me. We will later on see in today's talk that the Prophet is being told, "O Muhammad, either we will show you some of what we have promised to do to these antagonizers of yours and the disbelievers, or we shall take you before that." So the Prophet is left on a knife's edge. He doesn't know what will transpire. He is following the revelation by the moment, and he is being led. Now that is the realest story that takes place, and that is why it is so impactful, because that intensity of the Prophet, that caliber of his being, the way he is growing from within, that is what is spreading his message of unity and reliance upon Allah to those around him. So this community, as I'm going to explain, comes to a position of surrender to God, in which they are saying, yes, we are believing in Tawheed. We don't know if we will live or die. We don't know if Allah wants it to be spread through us or not. We don't know if this Muhammad will live or will go. And this is quite evident at the Battle of Uhud, when somebody cried out that Muhammad has been killed. The helpers of the Blessed Prophet, and we will discuss this in a few days, fled to Abu Sufyan. They said, "Give us amnesty. We will rejoin your faith." So even the Muslim community did not have any guarantees in their minds that this Prophet will live and be able to see us through and establish his religion. They did not know anything. And that is why it's a very real story at the human level. It's a planned story at the lofty level. It is all happening in sync. So Rasulullah is the rightest candidate. The first surah says, وَإِنَّكَ عَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. These are the first surahs that you are on the impeccable morals. And that's why you have been chosen as the candidate, even though he was already foretold. But he is the right candidate. The community around him, yep, these are clean slates, we can work with them. They will take the message far and wide. These are the right people. Everything was happening in a phenomenal way. So now, the revelation, we can see, it's very progressive. Study the Meccan Surahs. Although I haven't had the time to look at them all fully, but I intend to do so in due course of time in the years to come, and to discuss these things fully. But those who have already analyzed, if we take from them, and if we check, cross-reference a few of the surahs, we find that yes, it is not too far off. The very first surahs are very small, very rhythmic. The sounds of those surahs strike in the mind. And when you hear them, you immediately memorize them. That's amazing. You're going to a people who have a culture of oral transmission. They are accustomed to memorizing things, not writing them down. So their whole listening ability is very sharp. Now, when they listen to something, they'll memorize it, because that is their culture. Now you bring in surah that are ending with those rhythmic sounds, they will immediately listen to it once, apart from being filled with wonder that this is subhanallah from a very grand source. The other thing is that the mind will constantly pray that surah. It doesn't let go. I might want to give a crude example here. Sometimes we hear a bit of a tune, don't we? And that tune just fixes in our mind, and we get fixated on it. And it carries on playing it, and we hum it, and we sing it, and whatever. But that is the real way in which things are happening. There was a purpose behind that. Aside from the lofty meanings, the very sounds were so appealing that they stuck in the heads of the Meccans. And without wanting to, inadvertently, they were singing it and repeating it and regurgitating it in their minds again and again and again. Now, these small surahs came in order to first get these minds accustomed to something new that is coming. It was deliberately done. The themes in these surahs are simple themes, like the Tawheed of Allah, eschatology, so on and so forth. Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab, all about Abu Lahab. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, all about al-kawthar. Very simple themes, al-fil, surah fil, and whatever. Then progressively we see that the surahs become longer. And the clever way in which these surahs are formulated and structured. You find the stories of the past prophets. All the stories of the past prophets, by and large, come in the Meccan Surahs. 2/3 of the Quranic surahs are Meccan, 1/3 are Madinan. So 2/3 of the surahs that are coming in Mecca are talking about, go and check the surahs out. Taha and the emphasis on Moses, Surah Maryam on Maryam, Surah Yusuf on Yusuf. You will see it talks about Nabi Nuh, Adam, Nabi Nuh, Hud, Saleh, Ibrahim. It's sequentially done. Nabi Lut, Nabi Musa, sometimes Nabi Isa comes in as well, although Nabi Isa appears by and large in the Madinan surahs as well. But you will find that there are intriguing stories. Now, have you ever paid attention to this fact that you might find somebody like me talking boring and arduous to listen to, right? Don't say yes, don't know. But if somebody was telling a story, we would be attentive and we would be stuck, we would be filled with intrigue because we like stories. The storytelling is an art. They captivate us. Now, in those beautiful stories, then the theme of the unity of God comes in. The story of the chastisement that came upon the people who rejected those prophets. So it's storytelling. You look at the stories of Moses, they are phenomenal. It's the Quran, majority of it is filled with the story of Nabi Musa and the Pharaoh. Why? Because the situation of the prophet resembled the situation of the Pharaoh. In the community of Pharaoh, there are classes. There are the oppressed and there are the oppressive. There are people who are arrogant and full of power and merciless sort of tyranny. And then the way they are destroyed. So this storytelling style of the Quran really captivates the audience. The beautiful language, the wonderful stories. Now, as they hear the story, the other messages also get through into their heads. This is see what happened to their people, the deniers. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Himself. But Allah was the one who granted safety to Noah. Was there anybody else that could help him? Qarun was swallowed up by the earth and none could save him, save for Allah. Now the listeners are saying, yes, this makes sense. It's so eloquently presented. The stories are so wonderful. And then you have the Jewish community there, attesting to the fact that, you know what, historically this is all sound, because we have these stories in our scriptures as well. So you are seeing that the revelation is very deliberately planned to take the minds with it, from very short surahs to medium length surahs to longer surahs. All of these surahs are progressively educating its audience, captivating them. Then you come to the way in which the Quran fluctuates. It's very context specific. If you look at the Quran, and this is what I obviously read from somebody else, I need to check it out, but did cursory reading and said, yes, it sounds somewhat right, that the Prophet initially is made a mouthpiece, as we stated yesterday, to convey the message and to learn from it. He's just made a mouthpiece. But as the Prophet progresses in his prophetic journey, he becomes more comfortable with it. He becomes comfortable with the message. He becomes comfortable with his new mindset, with his outlook, with his own self. Now, in the beginning, he's the mouthpiece, but towards the end, Taha ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa. Now, Taha is being addressed directly. Yasin wal Qur'an al-Hakim, innaka lamin al-mursaleen. Yasin, by the noble Qur'an, indeed, you are amongst those that we have sent as a messenger or as a prophet. So here now the Quran is addressing the Prophet. Why? Because the Prophet now has expanded within his own soul. He is able to receive it. The Prophet is fully engaged. He is now committed. He knows he's on the truth. He knows he has a task ahead of him. He knows there is a mission. So now he is going with the mission. And the amazing thing is that the confidence that you find in the Blessed Prophet that we will see in a little while, that the confidence that he gets, he doesn't have in the very beginning. In the beginning, I don't know what revelation will come to me. Like we talked about it a few days ago, that there was a cessation or a pause in revelation, and the Prophet was perplexed and worried in response to his own psychological state. The verse comes, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Your Lord has not abandoned you, and neither has He forgotten you. This is the beginning part of the Prophet's missionary role. Towards the end, there is no question of the Prophet becoming perplexed or confused. He is comfortable, he is confident, and he knows what he is doing. Now I know, this might be a bit difficult to hear the humanness of the Prophet and the humanness of the revelation. But had it not been for a genuine Prophet, genuinely encountering the message and genuinely growing through it, he would not have attained the success that he attained. And it would not have been a real story. He is a person that evolves sequentially, bit by bit, step by step. And the revelation reflects his journey. Revelation is in sync with the growth process of the Prophet. And on the other hand, the revelation is carving out things all around the Prophet that the Prophet is unaware of. Everything is coming together beautifully like a hand in a glove. So then, the Quran then, in the beginning part, in the Meccan Surahs, you will see, this is an observation being made, that the Quran will address people as Ya ayyuhan nas. And then in the Medina, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Because in Makkah, there is no identity for the followers of the Prophet. They are one of a major community. So the verses are directed to one and all people, because the verses are talking about Tawheed. They are talking about eschatology, the Qiyamah, they're talking about good morality, so on and so forth. So it's for one and all. In Medina, they were a part of a multi-faith community. And they were being directed. Their identity had been established. Now, the second thing the Quran does in this progressive fashion is, it creates a separate identity. And this identity creation continues in Medina as well. You see, it's phenomenal the way Quran has done things. It's phenomenal. If you are a group of people who have an ideology that is separate from the main ideology, in order for you to establish yourself, what do you need to do? You need to create your own identity. That group needs to create its own identity. But how do you create your own identity? There are several ways. You can say, I am this, I am that, I am that. The Quran was saying it. We are this, we do this, we do this, we do this. But the best way of creating an identity at some point is what? By disassociation, confrontation with the status quo. Because that stirs people. It shakes people. It gets people talking. It elicits a reaction. Now, if you look at the Quran, you will say, I feel that the Quran deliberately was driving the whole situation to such an unbearable level that the Prophet had no choice but to migrate. And on the other hand, he was preparing the grounds in Medina for the Prophet to migrate and be accepted there. If you look at the Quran in a chronological order, you will say, wait a minute, there is something much grander happening here. The Prophet did not realize this. The Muslims did not realize this. They did not know what was coming. But the way in which the Quran was maneuvering was phenomenal. That the Quran wanted a head-on confrontation with the Meccans. Now, a head-on confrontation with the Meccans would only happen if the newborn Muslim community became intolerant of the Meccans. You see, in the initial phases, you find the Meccans are intolerant of the Muslims. But you read Surah Al-An'am, there is this relentless attack on the Meccans, their belief systems and whatever they are doing, and we will read it in a little while. Now that is downright offensive. That causes a lot of offense. And that offense was meant to be caused because something else was happening here. The Quran was assessing their psychological states and assessing their reactions. You see, no publicity is bad publicity. No publicity is bad publicity, honestly. When you say things, sometimes you drop in a line or two to arouse your listeners to react to you. Now, initially, in the initial stages, you might feel, oh, how dare they say this about me and that about me. Towards the later part, you want them to say all this about you. Why? Because it causes the message to spread and people to think. Things work in a very odd way. The more people who talk about you, they are actually spreading your message. That's it. No publicity is negative publicity. Sorry, I forgot that. So this is what sometimes is the method. Now the Quran employs this method. It is driving the whole community to a state of unforgivable tension and confrontation. Now, do you remember when Abu Sufyan and they came at a later date? We'll discuss that, might discuss that in a little while. And they said to Abu Talib, and the way God has placed Abu Talib, Salamullah alayhi, Hazrat Abu Talib is phenomenal, the way He's placed him already there, God knew what's going to happen, so Abu Talib is there for that time. In any case, tell him, we are ready. They were tired of him. They were tired of the Prophet and all the youths who started preaching and shouting Allahu Akbar in front of the Kaaba, and they were getting offended. You are disrupting our ceremonies. What are you doing? And they would be thrown away, or stones were thrown at them and they would be chased away. They got tired of it all. They went to the Prophet. They said, look, we'll believe in Allah and we'll believe in our gods as well. Any man should have taken that offer. If we think strategically, we'll say, you know what, that's an offer that I can't miss out on. I can carry on preaching. People are clever. They will listen to me. Eventually, I'll get there. But the plan of God was that, no, fast track the whole thing. Fast track it. In 23 years' time, oh Muhammad, you don't have time. I have planned you to come back to me at the age of 63, which gives you only 15 more years. In 15 years or 12 years, you're supposed to do your bit and come back to me. I need to fast track it, accelerate it. So what happens? No. The Prophet is not told, but the Prophet's attitude is such, I will not compromise. Put the sun in the right, the moon in the left, I will not compromise. I don't know whether the Prophet here was being strategical or he was just genuinely endowed with the message of Tawheed that just could not tolerate that type of immoral message and conduct and worldview and outlook that the Meccans had. I don't know what was his motivation. It might have been both, because I do feel towards the later part, the Prophet became very sharp. He knew what moves to make. But when you look at Medina, we will say, he was acting out of sincerity, innocence and genuineness. So all of these things are blending into the Prophet. We don't know which decision he has taken based on what motivation. So here it could have been either this or that. Now, you are preaching your message, O Prophet. They are making life unbearable for you. Why do you want to make things worse? Now this is a question. Many people who wish to challenge the status quo, they are asked and they are told, look man, they're calm. Speak with them calmly. Why do you want to irritate them even more? Don't irritate these people even more. They are unforgiving people. The Quran says no. Look at these verses that are revealed in Makkah. Now these are downright offensive to the Meccans. إِنَّكُمْ وَمَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ حَسَبُ جَهَنَّمْ أَنْتُمْ لَهَا وَارِدُونَ. All of you, and whatever you are worshipping other than Allah, you are the fuel for hell and you will all get there. Now imagine to say, you go to the Meccans and you tell them all your gods are going to hell with you. That is very, very offensive. It creates rage in the hearts of the Meccans. They are stirred even more. So even if they say we want to compromise with Muhammad, never, we will never compromise with this man and his followers. Who do they think they are? This was the rage that continued till the conquest of Makkah. The Muslims were offending them and offending them and offending them to elicit reaction upon reaction upon reaction. And every reaction that the Meccans gave was a victory for the Muslims in a very odd, strange way. Look at another verse. This is directly now offending them. It's meant to offend them. أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ Lat wal Uzza. Have you seen Lat and Uzza? Now how dare anybody talks of our God so mockingly? Have you seen Lat and Uzza? Wa Manat As-Salisat al-Ukhra, and the third one Manat. How do you say that? Have you seen Lat and Uzza and the third one Manat? This is not a respectful way to talk about their gods. I mean, we have to agree to that. It's an eloquent way of talking about them, but it is nonetheless offensive, right? أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى وَالْمَنَاةَ الثَّالِثَةَ الْأُخْرَى أَلَكُمُ الذَّكَرُ وَلَهُمُ الْأُنثَى. Do you have sons and God has daughters? Because these were three goddesses, daughters of God. The Arabs frowned upon having daughters and they prided themselves upon having sons. This says, so you want to give me daughters and keep sons for yourself? Immediately diminishing the worth of Lat, Uzza and Manat. Saying these are women, these are girls, they have no worth and value. So something that has no value is for God and everything that has value is for you. So you can see the tones are very teasing, they're very humiliating. I don't know if somebody else can read it a bit differently, but that's what but look at what the verse says after that. ذَلِكَ إِذًا قِسْمَةٌ ضِيزَى. That's most unjust of you, don't you think? Shouldn't God also have sons like you have sons? Why don't you keep the daughters and give me sons? Can you see that? It's very mocking style. It's mockery. إِنْ هِيَ إِلَّا أَسْمَاءٌ سَمَّيْتُمُوهَا أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمْ. These are mere names, Lat, Uzza and Manat. These are mere names that you and your forefathers have named these deities of yours. مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِن سُلْطَانٍ. Allah has not given any authority for you to say these things. إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ. Whatever you are following is a mere conjecture. It has no basis. It has no basis. These are futile, worthless theologies of yours. وَمَا تَهْوِي الْأَنفُسِ. And what your souls desire. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. Indeed, these people who are the followers of the Prophet, God has sent them guidance. Now you see Surah Araf, the confrontation is continuing, and at the same time it's impacting the listeners all the time. Now God is saying in Surah Araf, قَالَ ادْخُلُوا فِي أُمَمٍ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ فِي النَّارِ. He will say, enter into the fire with the people who have entered it before you of jinn and man. Then he describes their state in there. كُلُّ مَا دَخَلَتْ أُمَّةٌ لَعَنَتْ أُخْتَهَا. Every time a people enter into hell, they will curse their sister community. حَتَّى إِذَا ادَّارَكُوا فِيهَا جَمِيعًا. Until when all of them are gathered in hell, قَالَتْ أُخْرَاهُمْ لَأُولَاهُمْ. The later ones will say about the first ones, رَبَّنَا هَؤُلَاءَ أَضَلُّونَا. O Lord, these are the people who misguided us. So the surah is saying to them, you people who are following your elders and forefathers and Lat and Uzza and Manat, you will all gather in hell together. And the later ones amongst you will blame the former ones amongst you. And you will say, oh Lord, these are the ones who misguided us. فَأْتِهِمْ عَذَابًا ضِعْفًا مِنَ النَّارِ. Give them double share of hell, of fire. And God will say, for all is a double share, but you know not. In any case, the first people will say to the second people, God is informing this to the Meccan. وَقَالَتْ أُولَاهُمْ لَأُخْرَاهُمْ. The earlier ones will say to the later ones, فَمَا كَانَ لَكُمْ عَلَيْنَا مِنْ فَضْلٍ فَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْسِبُونَ. You have no preferential treatment above us. Taste the fire due to what you yourself have earned. So immediately the minds are being told that whatever you're doing and you're saying our forefathers and others have done this, you will burn with them. They will not take your share of the blame, and you will not be able to relieve yourself of the chastisement. Then another verse, and these are typical types that I'm reciting for you, clarifies that, look, if you follow them because they have mass following, or because you feel that they know more, this is the sort of mentality that the Prophet was confronting. Well, all of them have been following this for such a long time. He's a good friend of mine, he has studied, he knows, and people then, with those sort of excuses, act inconsistently with their better judgment. This verse, or these verses, address this type of mentality. وَأَقْبَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ. In paradise, some will gather with others and they will ask, قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ إِنِّي كَانَ لِي قَرِينٌ. I used to have a companion in the world. يَقُولُ أَإِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُصَدِّقِينَ. He used to tell me, do you really believe what this messenger is saying? أَإِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا وَعِظَامًا أَإِنَّنَا لَمَدِينُونَ. Shall we, when we've become bones and dust, be brought to account? Is something like this possible? قَالَ هَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُطَّلِعُونَ. A voice will come. Do you want to see the fate of that person? فَطَّلَعَ فَرَآهُ فِي سَوَاءِ الْجَحِيمِ. He will look on and he will find him in the depths of the fire. قَالَ تَاللَّهِ إِنْ كِدتَّ لَتُرْدِينَ. The man in paradise will say, you nearly ruined me. You nearly ruined me. وَلَوْلَا نِعْمَةُ رَبِّي لَكُنْتُ مِنَ الْمُحْضَرِينَ. And had it not been for the mercy of my Lord, I too would have been in hell with you. أَفَمَا نَحْنُ بِمَيِّتِينَ. You used to say, shall we die? إِلَّا مَوْتَتُنَا الْأُولَى. Save our first death. وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمُعَذَّبِينَ. And we will never be raised to be punished. In هَذَا لَهُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. Indeed, this is the grand triumph that Allah has given me. In another place, the people who are weak in mind will say to those people who led them, had it not been for you, we would have not been in hell today. So the people who convinced them will say, did we force you to follow us? They will say, no, your constant preaching day and night, your constant preaching brought us to a state in which we denied God and now we are suffering with you. So these were the sort of verses that were very, very confrontational. We continue with the confrontational verses. So on the one hand, they are disassociating themselves in order to create their own identity from the Meccan theologies. On the other hand, the Quran becomes more audacious to cut out from them in a societal fashion. How? Surah An'am. قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِي مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ إِلَّا يَكُنْ مَيْتَةً أَوْ دَمًا مَسْفُوحًا أَوْ لَحْمَ خِنْزِيرٍ فَإِنَّهُ رِجْسٌ أَوْ فِسْقٌ أُحِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ. Now the Meccans used to eat corpses, and they used to sacrifice animals on the names of their deities, and this was considered sacred food. The verse comes that say, I do not find anything haram to consume in what has been revealed to me, save that it be a dead carcass, it be a dead animal, or blood, because they used to consume blood, or it be an animal sacrificed in the name of other than Allah, for indeed it is a form of corruption. So here now, the followers of the Prophet are being told to distance themselves in terms of their consumption of food from their neighbors and their relatives. This is seen as offensive. Look at another verse. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يُذْكَرِ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَإِنَّهُ لَفِسْقٌ. Do not consume meat upon which the name of Allah has not been mentioned. It is a sure corruption. Indeed, shaitan inspires them. So this was the first thing in the creation of the identity, disassociation from the major group. The second thing was that they were given their own identity. Now you people pray at nights. Then they were told to pray in the daytime. Now here we find some historians saying that the Muslims used to pray alongside the Jews in the daytime, because the Jews used to pray in the daytime. And the dietary rules of the Muslims were like the Jews. So the Muslims did not find themselves alone, and the Jews also, those who were there, found that yes, this group is something that we too can live with and accommodate. The 5 Salah came after the Mi'raj of the Prophet. Now I want to quickly get through this, and then of course Zakat was institutionalized. Now, the physical context, this was the context of the revelation. The physical context, it was also falling together. The first thing the Prophet was told was, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. Call your near ones and warn them. So the Prophet said to his daughter, his uncles, I cannot save you from God. I cannot save you from chastisement. He was warning them. We find within our narrations that the Prophet said, who will accompany me, believe in me, with the promise that he will be my successor. And he will be the one who will lead after me. Imam Ali stood up. At that point, the Hashimis mocked at Abu Talib and said, now your son has become your master. In any case, when things progressively deteriorated, the Prophet had the support of his uncle, because at that point you needed to belong to a clan and you would have tribal support. The clan of Hashim was amongst the powerful clan of Makkah, Bani Makhzum and Banu Umayyah. There were also two other very strong clans. But the prestige of the Hashimis was undeniable. And so long as Abu Talib was there, they could not touch the Prophet or they could not harm him. Now, when the persecution reached its peak without wanting to kill the Prophet, because they could not kill the Prophet whilst Abu Talib was still alive, the Prophet said to his followers that, look, you can go to Ethiopia. There is a very just king there, Najashi. He will give you refuge. Go to him. So Hazrat Ja'far and Khalifa Uthman, the daughter's Prophet Ruqayya, whether it was from her and Khadija or from Khadija's previous marriages, together with 12 odd people and 4 women, they went there. Now when they reached there, the Meccans found out. So they sent Amr ibn As and another one to go there and to get back the fugitives. Now if you want to see how well everything has been planned, Surah Maryam was already revealed before they went to Abyssinia. Had Surah Maryam not been revealed prior to them going to Abyssinia, Najashi may have handed them over to the Meccans to bring them back. See the way in which things are happening. In any case, when they went there, they said, look, these are fugitives. Send them back. So Najashi called them. Ja'far went and he spoke. Najashi said, look, I am being told that you are fugitives. You have fled. You are people who are creating social discord. You are offensive people. What do you have to say for yourself? This is what the historians have recorded. I'm going to read this to see the impact of the message of the Blessed Prophet. He said, O King, we were wicked and ignorant people who worshipped idols and ate corpses. We committed all types of disgraceful acts and did not pay our due obligations to neighbors and relatives. The strong man of us suppressed the weak by power. Then Allah raised a prophet amongst us whose nobility, righteousness, good character, and pure life were well known to us. He called us to worship one God only and exerted us to give up idolatry and stone worship. He taught us to speak the truth, to fulfill the promise, to regard the rights of relatives and neighbors. He forbade us from indecency, asked us to offer prayer and to pay zakat, to shun everything foul and to avoid bloodshed. He forbade adultery, lewdness, telling lies, misappropriating the orphan's heritage, bringing false accusation against others, and all other indecent things to that effect. He taught us the Quran, the divine revelation. When we believed in him and acted upon his teachings, our people began to persecute us and to subject us to torture. When their cruelties exceeded all bounds, we took shelter in your country by the permission of our Prophet. Now this, by that time, is what the Muslim community had learned. So this was the teaching of the Prophet by the time of the first migration. So you can imagine, that's impressive. A total change from darkness into light. In any case, Amr ibn As was clever. He said, but have you heard what their Prophet says about your God Jesus? Yes, he was shocked at that point. He was not going to tolerate. He will listen to all of this, fine. But when it comes to Jesus, he's not going to tolerate anything, is he? He said, what do you have to say? Now at that point, Ja'far was shaken. He merely recited verses. And those verses, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَرْيَمَ إِذْ انْتَبَضَتْ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا مَكَانًا شَرْقِيًّا فَاتَّخَذَتْ مِنْ دُونِهِمْ حِجَابًا فَأَرْسَلْنَا إِلَيْهَا رُوحَنَا فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهَا بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا. We sent to her our spirit. He became embodied like a man. قالت إني أعوذ بالرحمن منك إن كنت تقيا I seek refuge in Allah from you, if you be a God-fearing soul. قال إنما أنا رسول ربك لأهب لك غلاما زكيا. Indeed, I am a messenger of your Lord to bring to you a noble child. And then he expressed those verses of Mary. Najashi began to weep, and honestly, these verses are so potent that when you see Mary, the chaste soul, what she was feeling and how she spoke. Now, Najashi knew how the Jews were talking about Lady Mary. They accuse her of all sorts of indecent acts. And the Quran talks about that as well, some of the Jews. And when he heard this, his eyes flooded with tears. And then, of course, we see this in the movie. I haven't found it anywhere. He drew a line upon the earth, and he said, the difference between you and I is as there is no line between these two, no difference. He drew two parallel lines, as there is no difference between these two parallel lines. Jafar said, he is the Spirit of God, the Word of God, the pure one. And Najashi was won over. But the thing that I want to put here is, and I'm not going to finish it today, by the way. The thing that I want to say here is, though, that look at the way things are happening. Had Surah Maryam not been revealed prior to this point, what would have happened? So you can see everything is planned, set in place, and the human story is taking place very really. It's a very real human effort, yet it is all planned and tweaked. It's being meticulously brought together. In any case, I just want to give two more things, and the next we'll do tomorrow. We find the boycott. Bani Makhzum were very powerful, rich people, and Bani Umayyah were Abu Sufyan. There were two Abu Sufyans in Makkah, right? One Abu Sufyan, the cousin brother of the Prophet, and one Abu Sufyan from Bani Umayyah. The Abu Sufyan of Bani Umayyah and his clan, they signed a treaty to boycott the Prophet and his. Now here the terms of the treaty were that lasted for 3 years from the 7th year of Hijrah, from 7th year prior from the prophetic mission, was that nobody will marry into the clan of Bani Hashim, nor take their daughters, and nobody will trade with them. Now, of course, the things were already put in place. Khadija's wealth supported them at that time. So everything was, contingencies were already made. It was already planned that their money, although they did starve, but that money did sustain them, that wealth did sustain them to a great extent. In addition to that, what was happening was that the Quraysh began to sympathize with the Hashimis. Now we hear that miraculously termites ate up the treaties that was signed and pinned to the wall of the Kaaba, but that might not have been the only thing. Actually, Bani Makhzum and Bani Umayyah must have been very happy that that treaty was eaten away by termites, because they were finding that it is not effective at all, and that actually the Prophet is winning many more sympathizers. They were feeling sorry. They had relatives there on that side. Secretly, they would go and give food. And they would always be warned. It's amazing the way things were happening. And then on the other hand, when the likes of Abu Jahl were chastising the Prophet, Hamza, from his hunting trip, came back, the lion of God and the lion of the Messenger of God. He came and he hit Abu Jahl when he was insulting the Prophet. Hamza was the age of the Prophet because the Prophet's father Abdullah and his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, they married on the same day, obviously two different women. And the Prophet and Hamza were of the same age. And Hamza was known. He was known for his strength and his might. Whenever the Prophet was vulnerable, something was there to protect him. God has already made these plans. I'm going to quickly finish this. The Mi'raj happens. When the Mi'raj happens in the later years, prior to migration, and the Prophet said, I went in one night to Jerusalem, and then I went to the skies, and the Meccan said, this is it, this will destroy him now. This is a crazy man, just, very imaginative. He just thinks of things, either being inspired by the jinn, or He's just lost it altogether. So they went to Abu Talib. They said, see what your nephew is saying now. He said in one night he went to Jerusalem and then he went here and there and everywhere. In fact, his followers were perturbed. Hazrat Abu Talib might have been perturbed that, what are you saying, oh blessed child of mine? What are you saying? I can't really defend these things anymore. But the way in which it all works out. So the Prophet says, actually, on my way to Jerusalem, I saw this caravan coming. It is at the distance of a day or two. In this caravan, there are these types of camels, these types of carriages. This is the sort of goods they are carrying. I spoke with such a person. There is such a person walking. They find this very intriguing. They found this all very intriguing. Sure enough, a caravan with that description approaches. Now, the prophet who's just a prophet becomes the head of all prophets that have gone before him. It's a phenomenal move, isn't it? What God is doing and how He's doing it. It's a phenomenal move. Immediately, the Meccans are now on the back foot. The Muslims are saying, look, this guy is true. And if he has gone to the seven heavens and all the prophets prayed behind him, he is the top one amongst all the prophets. Now we are no longer saying he is the prophet, he is the king of the prophets. The way in which things are working. By the way, according to the Quran, the prophet only went to Jerusalem, yes, physically. So when you go to Iraq and you say in Kufa, the prophet came to Kufa and went to Qum, that's not in the Quran, it might be somewhere else. It's very easy to put the prophet everywhere on the night of Mi'raj, isn't it? We come to the narration of Al-Hussein Salamullah alayh. As the soldiers of Yazid and Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad and Umar ibn Sa'ad gathered in Karbala, Bibi Zainab became anguished, fearful. She goes to her brother, she says, oh brother, I recite obviously the popular narration here. Oh brother, invite your supporters and your helpers. Imam Hussein turns to his sister and says, but who do I have here? She said, call on to your lifelong friend, your childhood friend, Habib ibn Madair. Imam dispatches a letter. There is a knock at the door of Habib in the depth of the night. He asks, who is at the door? And a response comes, the messenger of Hussein ibn Ali. Habib rushes to the door, retrieves the message, reads the content, which says, oh Habib, do not value yourself over me. Hasten to my assistance. Habib's wife asks him, who was it? The messenger of Hussein. What does he want? Hussein is trapped in Karbala, seeking my help. And your response? But what will happen to you, he said. Sorrow be your lot, O Habib. Should Hussein ask you for his assistance, for your assistance, and you be worried about me? Habib said, it is only a statement I uttered in order to test your resolve. Habib comes out in Kufa, meets Muslim ibn Usaja. He said, oh Muslim, do you know what has come of Hussein? He is trapped in Karbala, surrounded by enemies. Muslim said, in that case, by God, I shall give my life in the defense of Hussein ibn Ali and color my beard with my blood. It is said that at one point Imam Hussein is arranging his ranks and he's preparing the standards. He gives one to Abbas, gives one to somebody else. He retains a standard. The companions of Hussein are hopeful that Hussein will hand this standard over to us. But Hussein retains it and says, the bearer of this standard shall soon approach. As Hussein says this, from afar, the dust being raised from the hooves of a galloping horse was seen. Who comes at this time? As he approaches closer, they say it is Habib ibn Madair. Habib comes to Hussein. He looks at Hussein and says, even though I have become old, My bones have become frail. Whenever I see you, O Hussein, youthful blood begins to flow within my veins. Hussein embraces Habib. There is joy in the camp of Hussein. The women ask, what is this commotion? Why this joy? Habib, the companion of Hussein, has arrived. Zainab sends her salutations. When Habib hears her salutations, he cries out, oh, for destitution. What shall become of the daughters of Muhammad and Fatima? It is the day of Ashura. It is the time for the Lahore Prayers. Many of Hussein's companions have died. Abu Thumama reminds Imam Hussein that it is time for the noon prayers. Imam Hussein asks Habib, O Habib, seek respite from them that we may establish the Dhuhr prayer. Habib calls out and says, allow us to attend to our noon prayers. Hussein bin Namir cries out, O Hussein, pray as much as you want. God shall not accept any of your prayers. Habib, in a state of rage, calls out, O godless person, shall God accept your prayers and reject the prayers of the son of the messenger? Habib looks at Hussein and says, O Hussein, I would much rather pray this prayer with your grandfather in paradise. Allow me. Hussein says, as you wish, O Habib. He engages with the enemies, cries out, had we been your equal or half of you, you would have fled and shown us your back. Oh, godless people, how dare you call him to you, then put him to death. Habib engages with them in a battle. At one point, a sword descends upon Habib's head. Hussein bin Namir, we are told, embeds a spear in his blessed chest. He is unable to contain himself upon his steed. As he begins to fall, he calls out, O Aba Abdullah, peace be with you. Hamid ibn Muslim says that when I heard the voice of Habib, I saw the face of Hussein. It was as if he had lost all hope. I had not seen this grief prevail upon the face of Hussein. He ran to the body of Habib. He took his head and held it in his lap. He said, O Habib, you were a splendid man, O Habib. There was not a helper like you that has been given to anybody but to me. May Allah receive you in paradise. Matam Hussein.